personal, professional. I mean, I've got so many, but I think the one that I should tell is that
Outlaw image, he became one of the most recognizable figures in modern country music. But today, his name is back in the headlines, and the reason is sending shockwaves through both Nashville and his millions of fans. Over the years, Trace has been no stranger to controversy. Public divorces, battles with addiction, near-death accidents, and career highs and lows. But the latest revelations seem to cut deeper than ever before. Reports suggest a man at a crossroads facing questions about his health, his relationships, and his future in the music industry. Some say this is the most personal chapter of his life yet, one that could redefine how the world sees him. For a star who has always balanced the line between resilience and destruction, the question now is simple. Will Trace Adkins rise again, or is this the beginning of his final act? Before the headlines, before the scandal, and before the heartbreak, there was a boy from Sarepta, Louisiana, who dreamed of making his mark with a voice unlike any other. Born Tracy Darrell Adkins in 1962, he grew up in a small town where hard work and faith defined daily life. His father was a tough man who demanded discipline, while his mother instilled in him a deep appreciation for music. Trace's first exposure to performing came through church, where he sang in the choir and began to understand the power of his rich, deep baritone. But his path to stardom was anything but smooth. In fact, it often seemed cursed. After high school, he played college football at Louisiana Tech, but his dream of going pro ended with a devastating knee injury. That setback could have broken him, but instead, it pushed him back toward music, the one thing that had always been waiting for him. He picked up a guitar, honed his voice, and began performing in small bars and honky-tonks across Louisiana and Texas. His commanding presence and thunderous voice quickly set him apart. Still, life had more trials in store. In the late 1980s, Trace nearly lost his left pinky finger in an oil field accident, forcing doctors to reattach it at an angle that made playing guitar forever difficult. Then came another brush with death, a horrific car accident that left him with broken rib and a collapsed lung. But perhaps the most shocking near-death experience of all happened at home, when his second wife shot him during a heated argument. The bullet grazed his heart and both lungs, but incredibly, he survived. Each of these trials could have ended his story, yet Trace seemed determined to walk through fire and emerge strong. In 1994, he moved to Nashville with little more than determination and that unmistakable voice. It didn't take long for the town to note it. By 1996, his debut single, There's a Girl in Texas, climbed the charts, and his album, Dreamin' Out Loud, launched him into the national spotlight. Hits like Every Light in the House and This Ain't No Thinkin' Thing established him as a rising star. The boy from Louisiana had turned pain into power, and audiences couldn't get enough. To fans, Trace Adkins wasn't just another singer, he was a survivor, a man whose life story was etched into every note he sang. By the early 2000s, he was one of country's most recognizable voices, known for both rowdy anthems and heartfelt ballads. But behind the chart success, the headlines were already beginning to follow him, hinting that his battles with fate were far from over. For Trace Adkins, fame was never just about the music. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, the headlines seemed to chase him, and often they told stories as dramatic as his song. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Trace was riding high on a string of hits. But journalists were just as interested in his personal life as they were in his career. He became known as much for his rugged, trouble-tested image as for his voice, and soon the tabloids couldn't resist digging deeper. His divorces were among the first major stories to dominate the news. Trace married 3 times, and each split carried its own share of scandal. Reporters seized on court filings, financial disputes, and whispered rumors of betrayal. For a man who sang so passionately about love and heartbreak, these public battles only added to his legend. Fans sympathized with the hurt, while critics painted him as reckless. But the most infamous headline came in 1994, before his career had even taken off, when his then-wife shot him during a fight. The incident was nearly fatal and could have ended everything. Yet, Trace chose not to press charges, and instead, he turned the ordeal into another chapter in his survival story. That near-death moment would be referenced in countless articles, interviews, and retrospective, becoming a defining part of his public image. In the years that followed, Trace also made headlines for his struggles with alcohol. Stories of bar fight, rehab visits, and on-stage slips circulated widely. His larger-than-life persona, boisterous, unapologetic, and sometimes self-destructive, kept the press watching closely. Every stumble was magnified, but every comeback made him seem even stronger. His 2007 album, Dangerous Man, wasn't just a title, it was how the media framed him. Then came the headlines outside of music. Trace became a household name to new audiences when he joined The Celebrity Apprentice with Donald Trump. His no-nonsense attitude and country grit made him stand out, and his appearances created a surge of publicity. He wasn't just a singer anymore, he was a television personality, a political voice, and a cultural figure who could command attention on any stage. His support for conservative politics also sparked debates and headlines, particularly as he performed at political events and didn't shy away from expressing his views. Yet through it all, Trace seemed to thrive on the chaos. The headlines made him unpredictable, and unpredictability made him unforgettable. Some stars crumble under the glare of constant scrutiny, but Trace Adkins wore it like armor. Still, behind the tough exterior, every headline left its mark, shaping a man who was always one step away from either triumph or tragedy. And now, as new reports circulate, it seems the pattern continues. Only this time, the stakes feel higher than ever before. In recent months, Trace Adkins's name has been plastered across headlines once again, but not for the usual reasons of a chart-topping single or a rowdy television appearance. This time, the reports surrounding him have carried a weight that feels different, almost final, as if the story of Trace is entering its most decisive chapter yet. Sources close to the singer began whispering of health concerns. Rumors that Trace, now in his early 60s, has been quietly facing challenges that could threaten his ability to perform with the same thunderous energy that once defined his career. While official statements remain scarce, fans noticed canceled appearances, reduced touring schedules, and a more subdued Trace on stage. Some speculated about vocal strain, others about physical ailments tied to his long history of accidents and surgery. What is certain is that the man once known for walking away from near-fatal incidents with a grin now carries himself with the slower, heavier presence of someone who has fought too many battles. Beyond health, the headlines also highlight major shifts in his personal life. Trace's marriage to actress Victoria Pratt, once celebrated with glowing press, has recently come under scrutiny. Paparazzi shots, social media rumors point to cracks in what seemed like a stable chapter of his story. For a man who has endured multiple failed marriages, these suggestions sting especially hard. To his loyal fans, they evoke a painful sense of déjà vu. Another reminder that Trace's personal life has always been as stormy as the outlaw songs he sings. But it isn't all struggle. Mixed into these troubling reports are flashes of unexpected career moves. Recently, Trace has been linked to new collaborations in Nashville, with younger country stars citing him as both a mentor and a living legend. Industry insiders claim he's been quietly recording material that blends his gritty outlaw sound with modern production, an attempt to reintroduce himself to a new generation. Yet the timing of these rumors only adds to the mystery. Is this the start of a comeback, or a farewell gift to fans who have walked with him through decades of highs and lows? The headlines now circulating reflect this tension perfectly. One article paints him as a man fading from the spotlight, while another declares that he's preparing his boldest return yet. For every fan worried about his health, another celebrates the whispers of a new project. For every critic predicting his fall, another insists Trace Adkins has always been at his best when pushed against the wall. In truth, no one knows for certain where the story leads. What we do know is this: when Trace Adkins's name appears in the headlines, it's never ordinary, never safe, and never without consequence. And right now, the world is watching closely, waiting to see if this towering figure of country music has one more defiant roar left in him, or if these headlines are marking the slow, quiet exit of a legend. Behind every headline about Trace Adkins lies a story of struggle, often unseen by the casual fan, but deeply etched into the man himself. While the public saw the towering cowboy with the booming baritone voice, what they rarely saw were the shadows he carried with him off stage. Alcohol has long been one of his fiercest battles. Trace himself has admitted that his drinking nearly cost him everything: his career, his family, and even his life. Over the years, There were multiple stints in rehab, each accompanied by headlines that questioned whether he could ever stay sober. In 2001, he entered treatment for alcoholism after a very public collapse. Later, in 2014, another stint followed a heated incident on a cruise ship where he reportedly lost control in front of fans. Each time, the headlines stung, but Trace faced them with the same raw honesty that defined his music. He never pretended to be perfect. Instead, he let the world see his scars, insisting that the only way forward was through truth. Yet alcohol wasn't his only demon. His near-death experiences left more than just physical scars. The car accidents, the oil field injury, and of course, the night his wife pulled the trigger and sent a bullet tearing through his chest. All these moments created a man who lived on borrowed time. Trace has said in interviews that surviving so many close calls gave him both gratitude and recklessness. Gratitude because he knew life could end at any second. Recklessness because he felt invincible, as if destiny itself had spared him for reasons he couldn't explain. This mindset often pushed him to extreme, whether on stage, in relationship, or in his own habit. His family life suffered under the weight of these struggles. Multiple divorces, bitter custody battles, and public disputes drained him emotionally. For a man who wrote and sang about love so convincingly, his own experience with it was riddled with pain and loss. His current marriage to Victoria Pratt seemed, for a time, to mark stability at last. But the pressure of fame and the ghosts of past mistakes have never truly left him. Even in his professional life, the struggles left mark. His reputation as a country outlaw gave him an edge, but it also alienated him from Nashville's more polished establishment. While some artists were embraced as industry darlings, Trace often stood as the outsider, admired by fans for his grit, but overlooked by award shows and elite circles. He bore it with pride, but the sting was always there. These hidden struggles explain why the latest headlines feel so heavy. They are not isolated incidents. They are the continuation of a lifetime of battles fought in the open and in the dark. Every canceled show, every whispered rumor of health issues, every sign of personal turmoil resonates, because people know Trace Adkins has been here before, standing at the edge, but each time, he has clawed his way back. The question now is whether the strength that carried him through the past can sustain him again, or whether these struggles are finally taking their toll in a way even Trace can't overcome. Trace Adkins's music has always carried themes of heartbreak, redemption, and the complicated ties of family. But behind the songs that made him famous lies a personal history of love gained and lost, a trail of fractured relationships that has shaped both the man and the headlines that surround him today. His journey through marriage has been anything but smooth. Trace has walked down the aisle 4 times, and each chapter has carried both joy and turbulence. His early marriages ended quietly, but by the time he became a public figure, his private life was no longer shielded from scrutiny. Divorce filings made front-page news, with financial disputes and custody battles dissected by tabloids hungry for detail. Trace often channeled that pain into his music, turning personal wreckage into songs that resonated with anyone who had loved and lost. Yet nothing compares to the shocking incident in the 1990s when his second wife shot him during an argument, leaving him inches from death. That one moment encapsulated the stormy nature of his relationships and left scars, physical and emotional, that would never fully heal. It also reinforced the media's fascination with his love life. To the press, Trace wasn't just a country singer. He was a man whose romances played out like tragic ballads. His most recent marriage to actress Victoria Pratt in 2019 was hailed as a new beginning. Fans saw the union as a chance for Trace to finally find stability after years of chaos. Their wedding in New Orleans was celebratory, attended by friends, family, and even officiated by fellow country star Blake Shelton. For a while, it seemed the headlines had shifted from tragedy to hope. Yet, as the years rolled on, whispers of strain began to emerge. Rumors of disagreements, long separations due to touring schedules, and the inevitable glare of public life began to seep into the narrative. Social media became both a blessing and a curse. Fans watched their every move, analyzing posts, appearances, and silences for signs of trouble. Beyond his marriages, Trace's family life has been shaped by fatherhood. He has 5 daughters, and his role as a father has been a central part of his identity. In interviews, He has often spoken with pride about raising strong, independent young women. But even here, the fractures show. His demanding career and tumultuous personal life sometimes pulled him away from home, and at times the headlines painted him as absent, consumed by the chaos of his world. Yet through all the ups and downs, Trace never stopped emphasizing family as his anchor, even when he struggled to hold it all together. These stories of love and fractures make the latest headlines especially painful for fans. Each new report of strain in his marriage or shifts in his family dynamic feels like a continuation of a saga that has lasted decades. People want to believe that after all he's endured, Trace might finally find peace in love. But for a man whose life has always been a battlefield between triumph and turmoil, love has often been the hardest fight of all. And as the newest headlines suggest, that fight is far from over. For more than 3 decades, Trace Adkins has walked the fine line between triumph and disaster in his career. He's never been the polished Nashville golden boy, never the radio-friendly darling that labels could count on to deliver squeaky clean success. Instead, he built his career on grit, survival, and an unshakable connection with fans who saw in him something raw and real. But as the latest headlines swirl, question grows louder than ever. Is Trace Adkins on the verge of a career revival, or are we witnessing the quiet collapse of a legend? In the early 2000s, Trace was unstoppable. Songs like Honky Tonk Badonkadonk, Ladies Love Country Boys, and You're Gonna Miss This made him a staple of country radio, blending humor, grit, and heartfelt storytelling. His deep baritone was unmatched, a voice that carried authority and soul. He sold millions of albums, toured worldwide, and even crossed into mainstream recognition through appearances on television and film. Yet his momentum was always interrupted by personal setbacks, battles with addiction, and the ever-changing landscape of country music. Nashville began to shift toward a younger, pop-influenced sound, and Trace's traditional outlaw-inspired style suddenly seemed out of step. By the 2010s, his radio presence had faded, and many wondered if his career was nearing its natural end. But then, like a fighter refusing to stay down, Trace found new ways to stay relevant. His turn on The Celebrity Apprentice introduced him to millions outside the country world. His acting roles in films like The Lincoln Lawyer and TV cameos reminded audiences that he was more than just a voice. And his live shows, legendary for their energy, kept die-hard fans coming back year after year. Recently, however, the headlines have cast doubt on his future. Canceled shows, whispers of health issues, and reports of personal turmoil have fueled speculation that Trace may no longer be able to command the stage as he once did. His voice, still powerful, has shown signs of strain, and his commanding physical presence has softened with age. Yet at the same time, rumors of a comeback swirl just as strong. Insiders claim he's been back in the studio, experimenting with fresh sounds while staying true to the outlaw core that made him unique. Younger country stars have begun citing him as an influence, inviting him into collaborations that could bridge the gap between generations. And his loyal fan base, many of whom have stood by him since the 1990s, remain eager for whatever he delivers next. The tension is undeniable. On one side are the signs of decline, the weight of years and struggles that no man, no matter how tough, can escape. On the other side is the enduring resilience of a performer who has survived more setbacks than most could imagine. Trace Adkins has always been defined by comebacks. Every time the world thought he was finished, he reappeared, scarred but unbroken. The latest headlines may suggest his career is in jeopardy, but history has shown us that with Trace, collapse is never the full story. Revival may be waiting just around the corner. When Trace Adkins makes headlines, the ripple effect spreads far beyond Nashville. Fans, critics, fellow musicians all weigh in, and their reactions often reveal just how deeply his story resonates. The latest reports surrounding Trace have sparked a wave of response that show both the loyalty of his supporters and the unease of an industry unsure of what comes next. For fans, Trace has always been more than a country singer. He's been a survivor. They've followed him through every brush with death, every rehab stint, and every personal scandal, never abandoning him even when the press painted him in the darkest light. Social media flooded with comments after the most recent rumors of health concerns and canceled shows. Longtime fans expressed heartbreak, insisting they would stand by him no matter what, while newer listeners, drawn in by his collaborations with younger stars, voiced hope that he still had more music to give. Some fans posted personal stories about how songs like "You're Gonna Miss This" carried them through grief, or how "Every Light in the House" reminded them of lost love. For these people, Trace's struggles feel personal, almost like watching a family member endure hardship. The devotion is unwavering, even as they worry that the man who gave them so much might finally be reaching his limit. Within the industry, however, the response has been more complicated. Country radio has long moved on to slicker, younger voices, and executives question whether Trace still fits the commercial mold. Some insiders whisper that he's a legend whose time has passed, a relic of a rowdier era. But others argue that Trace's authenticity is exactly what country music needs in an age where fans are demanding more honesty and less polish. His name still carries weight, and younger artists line up to share a stage or recording booth with him. Luke Bryan has praised Trace's influence. Blake Shelton, who officiated his wedding, continues to voice his support. Even stars outside of country, impressed by his resilience and commanding presence, have acknowledged him as one of the most distinctive voices in music. These endorsements keep his relevance alive, even when industry gatekeepers hesitate. Still, the shockwaves extend beyond admiration. Every time Trace stumbles, it sparks conversations about the pressures of fame, addiction, and survival in the music business. His story is a reminder that behind every hit record is a human being, fighting battles the audience may never fully see. The latest headline, whether focused on health, marriage, or career uncertainty, highlight those themes once again, leaving the industry to ask, how much can one man endure before the music stops? And yet, there is another perspective, one that cannot be ignored. For many, Trace Adkins represents country music at its rawest, a man who embodies the pain, the humor, and the grit of the genre. If this is truly the twilight of his career, then these headlines are not just about one man, they are about the closing of a chapter in country history. The fans feel it, the industry feels it, and Nashville itself feels it. That is why the reaction has been so intense, because Trace Adkins has never been just another singer. He is, for better or worse, the embodiment of country music's unvarnished truth. Trace Adkins has never lived a quiet life. Every chapter of his story has been larger than life, from the oil field accidents that nearly claimed his hand to the bullet that tore through his chest, from the bar fights and rehab stints to the platinum albums and sold-out tours. He has survived crashes, collapses, and chaos, yet always managed to rise again with that unmistakable baritone voice that seems carved from stone. And now, as his name resurfaces in the latest headlines, the question hangs in the air like a storm cloud. Is this the final chapter for Trace Adkins, or just another trial in a life defined by survival? What we know is that the latest news has struck a nerve. Reports of health concern, canceled show, and whispers about marital strain have reignited public fascination with his resilience. To some, these are the signs of a legend nearing the end of his run, a man worn down by decades of battles with fate. To others, they are simply the familiar markers of a warrior preparing for another comeback. Because if Trace's story has taught us anything, it's that he rarely surrenders when the world expects him to. For fans, this uncertainty is both heartbreaking and inspiring. They see a man who has given them decades of music that mirrored their own struggles and joys. They see someone who fell, stumbled, and bled in public, yet never pretended to be perfect. Trace Adkins has always been authentic, and that authenticity is what made people love him. Whether singing about family, faith, heartbreak, or the wild chaos of honky-tonk nights, he has always sounded like a man who lived the words he sang. And in truth, he has. The industry, too, feels the weight of these headlines. Nashville has changed. The country music charts are dominated by younger, flashier names with polished production and crossover appeal. Yet Trace stands as a reminder of what the genre once was and what it could still be: honest, unfiltered, and raw. For every executive who dismisses him as past his prime, there are younger artists who cite him as a hero, a mentor, and a trailblazer. His influence is undeniable, etched not only in his own hits, but in the voices of those he has inspired. Still, the question of legacy looms large. How will Trace Adkins ultimately be remembered? As the rowdy outlaw with a sharp wit and a dangerous edge? As the family man who sang one of country's most heartfelt ballads in "You're Gonna Miss This"? Or as the survivor whose personal scars became part of his art, making him more human than myth? Perhaps the answer is all of the above, because Trace has never fit into one box. He has been complicated, flawed, resilient, and unforgettable. The latest headlines do not define him. They simply add to the long, winding story of a man who has lived more in 6 decades than most could in 10 lifetimes. As Trace Adkins steps into whatever comes next, whether it be a bold career revival or a quiet retreat from the spotlight, one truth remains clear. His voice, his presence, and his story have already carved a place in the history of country music that no headline can erase. For fans, the hope is that this isn't goodbye, that there are still songs left to be sung and stages left to be conquered. But even if the curtain is slowly closing, Trace Adkins has given the world something far more enduring than fame. He has given us the sound of survival, the echo of resilience, and the reminder that even the toughest battles can be met with grit, humor, and song. And so, the headlines may fade, but the legend of Trace Adkins will remain, carried in every note, every lyric, and every memory of the man who turned a life of chaos into music that will outlive him.